It happened in an instant, but that instant changed everything. The atmosphere inside the WWE SmackDown arena had already been thick with tension. A faction war had been brewing for weeks. Seth Rollins and Paul Heyman, once bitter enemies, now stood aligned in an unholy alliance. Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and even Damian Priest had quietly backed their uprising, slowly dismantling every remnant of Roman Reigns' once untouchable empire. The tribal chief had not been seen in over a month. Whispers of retirement had swirled. Injuries, betrayal, a hospital stay, no one knew the truth. WWE had gone silent. Paul Heyman said nothing. The bloodline name had been dragged through the mud. And Seth Rollins? He laughed louder with every week that passed, but no one was ready for what came next. Just as the main event segment was about to close, the lights went out. Not a flicker. A full blackout. The air shifted. The crowd screamed. The sound of heavy breathing filled the arena. A single spotlight beamed onto the stage, and there he stood. Roman Reigns. But not the Roman anyone remembered. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't smug. He wasn't even angry. He was calm. Cold. Focused. And standing behind him, like a silent shadow carved from stone, was a figure no one could immediately place. Towering. Hooded. Unmoving. A new presence. An enforcer. Paul Heyman's face drained of color at ringside. Seth Rollins went pale. Braun Breaker instinctively stepped in front of them like a bodyguard sensing incoming danger, but even he looked unsure. Roman took a step forward, microphone in hand. The crowd erupted in deafening roars, but he waited. Waited until the noise gave way to a quiet that was almost unnatural. His voice, when it came, was low. Controlled. "I didn't come back to reclaim anything," he said. "I came back to destroy everything that betrayed me." The camera cut to Heyman, who looked like he'd seen a ghost. And in that moment, it was clear, this wasn't just a return. It was a reckoning. Backstage, WWE production staff were in chaos. Headsets buzzed with panic. Vince's office was locked. Triple H had already left the arena earlier that evening. No one had cleared this return. Not a single soul. Yet there Roman stood, not just present, but commanding. He walked slowly down the ramp, the enforcer behind him never flinching. The audience, sensing the gravity of what they were witnessing, stayed standing. No chants, no distractions, only awe. In a business defined by staged conflict, this felt real. Too real. The camera panned across the ring. Seth Rollins, clutching his Money in the Bank briefcase, took a single step backward. Roman clocked it. He raised an eyebrow. "You took my legacy," he said, "but you couldn't carry my burden." Then he turned his head ever so slightly toward Heyman. "You built your kingdom on the ashes of my family, and you're going to burn for it." What followed was not a brawl. Not yet. Roman Reigns didn't rush the ring. He didn't bark orders. He simply stood outside the ropes and stared. That was all it took. Because in that silence, something became terrifyingly clear. Roman Reigns hadn't returned to ask for his seat back. He had come to flip the table over. Social media exploded within minutes. #TribalChief was trending worldwide. Fans screamed at the screen, "Who is the enforcer?" Others began replaying Roman's cryptic words, dissecting them line by line. Had he known this moment was coming? Had he been planning it all along? Was this return a calculated strike, or an act of desperation? In truth, this wasn't sudden at all. Sources backstage told a different story. One that began weeks earlier. Roman Reigns had been seen in private gyms, isolated performance centers, training in total silence. No entourage. No bloodline. Just him, and a man no one recognized. A ghost from Roman's past? A new mercenary? Theories spread like wildfire. Some said the man had MMA training. Others whispered he was a former enforcer for the Anoa'i family, plucked from exile. WWE officials, when pressed, offered no comment. And that silence only added to the mystique. Rollins was rattled. That much was clear. Backstage, moments after the segment ended, cameras caught him pacing the hallway like a man haunted by something he couldn't shake. Paul Heyman followed close behind, eyes wide, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. Security had been instructed to keep Roman away from talent areas. But no one wanted to enforce it. Who would? Who would tell the tribal chief he couldn't go where he wanted? Rollins grabbed a production assistant by the collar and barked, "What the hell is going on?" But there were no answers. Only rumors. Some said Roman had been negotiating with a global security group to protect him during his return. Others said the new enforcer was family, an unknown cousin from the Samoan dynasty, raised in secrecy. A man built not for the spotlight, but for vengeance. Then came the leaks. An anonymous WWE staffer, who refused to give their name, sent an encrypted email to a wrestling news site the next morning. The subject line was simple: Roman's return was a warning. Inside were fragments of internal memos. Messages between high-level producers and creative writers. One in particular stood out. It read, "Roman says he doesn't want creative input. He's not working a storyline. He wants to go unscripted. We're not stopping him. No one will." The WWE locker room, already divided, began to fracture. Several wrestlers reportedly refused to comment publicly, fearing blowback from either faction. But whispers grew louder. Kevin Owens was overheard saying, "This feels different." Drew McIntyre, in a closed-door meeting, reportedly warned officials, "If Roman's building his own army, we better decide whose side we're on, before it's too late." And then, there was the enforcer. Grainy photos began surfacing online. Shots of Roman training in a private gym in Florida. A massive figure in the background. No face. Just a silhouette. Arms like tree trunks. A presence that filled the frame even in blurry pixels. Fan accounts began theorizing. Could it be Jacob Fatu returning under a new identity? Could it be Zilla Fatu, rising from the ashes of the Bloodline's collapse? Or was this someone else entirely, someone we weren't supposed to know? Seth Rollins remained silent for 48 hours. No tweets. No interviews. No smug promos. Just silence. Until the following Monday, on Raw, where he finally appeared. But something was different. The bravado was there, but the edge, the certainty, was gone. He walked to the ring with purpose, but his eyes darted toward the entrance ramp far too often. Even mid-promo, he glanced behind him. Paranoia had taken root. He addressed Roman's return with forced nonchalance. "The tribal chief wants to play shadow games? Good. Let him. Because while he's busy sulking in the dark, I'm running this place in the light." The crowd cheered, but Rollins didn't. Not really. The smirk faded as quickly as it came. Backstage, Heyman tried to regain control. He called a closed-door meeting with Braun Breaker, Bronson Reed, and Damian Priest. According to a source inside the arena, Heyman paced the room, sweat staining his collar, repeating one phrase over and over: "We underestimated him." At one point, Reed reportedly slammed his fist into the table and asked, "Why now? Why bring in someone new? What does he want?" The answer came days later. Another SmackDown. Another moment. This time, Roman didn't wait for the lights to dim. He walked out during the opening segment. No music. No theatrics. Just him and the enforcer, now partially unhooded. The crowd gasped. The man's face was hard, unfamiliar, but carried a striking resemblance to the Anoa'i lineage. Thick jaw, piercing eyes, the aura of someone who had done very bad things and didn't regret a single one. Roman entered the ring and held the mic for exactly 7 seconds before speaking. "I gave you peace," he said, looking directly at the camera. "I walked away. I let you all breathe. And what did you do with it? You tried to erase me." Then he turned toward the crowd, his voice rising. "You cheered when they mocked my name. You clapped when they said I was finished. You listen to a man with a briefcase pretend he built this. But the truth is simple. There is no WWE without Roman Reigns. There is no bloodline without the tribal chief. And now, there is no more mercy. The crowd erupted. Chants of Roman. Roman filled the arena, and then Roman said the words that turned this into war, to Paul Heyman, to Seth Rollins, to every man who chose sides when I wasn't there, your time is up. I'm taking it all back. And I'm not alone. He pointed toward the enforcer. This is judgment. This is retribution. This is my final bloodline. That was the final straw. Backstage, chaos erupted. Paul Heyman reportedly stormed into WWE headquarters demanding answers. He told senior officials that if Roman was allowed to operate unscripted, you're going to have real fights breaking out on your show. But WWE did not respond. Because deep down, they knew, this was good for business. This was the kind of drama you couldn't script. And Seth Rollins? He knew it too. Because now, he wasn't just holding on to a faction. He was defending a throne that Roman Reigns had built, one he was now returning to claim, brick by brutal brick. And this time, Roman brought a monster with him. Backstage, after the second SmackDown invasion, Seth Rollins was no longer the visionary. He was a man cornered, a champion with the weight of an empire on his shoulders, and he could feel it cracking beneath him. Cameras weren't allowed in the room, but insiders leaked enough to paint the picture. Seth slammed his fist into a metal locker. Paul Heyman sat silent in the corner, his hands shaking slightly. Braun Breaker, once the confident enforcer of the Rollins faction, asked the one question no one wanted to voice: what if we can't stop him? What if they couldn't? This wasn't the same Roman Reigns who had ruled WWE for years with calm dominance and sly intimidation. No. This was a man reborn from betrayal. Roman had tasted the fall. He'd been humiliated, mocked, left to rot in the silence while Seth paraded his faction like a trophy. And now he had come back, not just to reclaim the throne, but to reduce it to ashes and bury everyone who sat upon it. The new enforcer was the key to all of it. No one knew his name yet. Not officially. WWE hadn't updated their roster. There was no Titantron package, no social media post, no merchandise, no clue. But insiders started whispering what others dared not say aloud: the enforcer wasn't just a bodyguard. He was a weapon. A final deterrent. Someone who owed Roman a debt so deep, he would burn the entire roster down to repay it. Then came the footage. Leaked security cam footage from the WWE Performance Center, grainy, time-stamped, barely lit, showed Roman in the ring with the enforcer during off hours. No trainers. No camera crew. Just them. What the video revealed sent shockwaves through those who saw it. The enforcer took 5 consecutive super kicks from Roman, and didn't move. Not a flinch. Not a stumble. Just stared. Roman nodded. The session ended. The message was clear. Roman hadn't recruited a wrestler. He had summoned a force of nature. Rollins wasn't stupid. He knew what was coming. So he did what he always did best: he acted first. The following Raw opened with an unexpected announcement. Seth Rollins, flanked by Paul Heyman and Braun Breaker, declared a preemptive strike. Roman wants to play ghost games? We bring war to his doorstep first, Rollins said, adrenaline coursing through his voice, masking the fear behind his eyes. Next week on SmackDown, we're not waiting. We're hunting. That same night, the locker room split. Damian Priest reportedly pulled Rollins aside and warned, if this goes too far, we're going to lose everything. But Seth didn't blink. He replied with only one sentence: then we lose on our terms. Meanwhile, Roman remained silent. For 5 days, there was nothing. No tweets. No promos. No sightings. But his absence spoke louder than words. WWE officials confirmed to select media outlets that Roman Reigns has returned under a unique performer contract, which essentially meant he answered to no one. He didn't attend creative meetings. He didn't submit promos for approval. He came and went as he pleased. And the executives allowed it. Because they knew, Roman Reigns was ratings, the next SmackDown arrived like thunder on the horizon. The night opened with heavy security presence. Rollins, Heyman, Braun, and Reed entered the ring flanked by uniformed personnel. This wasn't a segment. This was protection. The lights flickered. The crowd chanted Tribal Chief, even before Roman appeared. Then the screen cut to black and white, not grayscale. Not cinematic, true black and white. Roman Reigns appeared on the screen in an empty warehouse. He stood in shadow, dressed in black, the enforcer beside him sharpening a steel chain in his bare hands. Roman spoke slowly, his voice smooth and venomous. "This isn't a story," he said. "This isn't a comeback. This is a funeral." He stepped forward, eyes burning. "You betrayed the bloodline," he said, glaring through the lens at Paul Heyman. "You fed Seth my legacy. You watched my house burn and sold the ashes as souvenirs. But I remember. Every slight. Every insult. Every man who smiled when I was down." The enforcer looked up from the chain, his expression unreadable. "You call yourselves a faction?" Roman continued. "You think you know what loyalty is? I bled for my family. I carried this company when no one else could. I turned whispers into war cries. And now, you all pay." The screen cut to black, then came the music. Not Roman's old theme. Not the Bloodline's tribal drums. Something new. Something darker. The bass hit. The lights crashed. And Roman walked out, not through the ramp, but from the crowd, through the people. The enforcer followed. And the arena lost its mind. Security rushed to block him. Roman didn't flinch. The enforcer moved first. In a single, brutal instant, 3 guards were on the floor. One tossed like a rag doll into the barricade. Another crushed with a shoulder so fast it looked inhuman. Roman walked forward, never breaking stride. The path cleared. Seth Rollins slid out of the ring. Braun Breaker stood his ground, until the enforcer stepped in. The two stared down for what felt like forever. Braun's chest heaved. The enforcer? Nothing. Just silence. Then Roman spoke. "Run." And Braun did. Paul Heyman tried to reason. He grabbed the mic. "Roman, please. This isn't the way." But Roman only shook his head. "You broke the oath, Paul." Heyman, shaking, whispered, "I made you." Roman raised the mic one final time. "No. I made myself. And now I unmake you." The crowd gasped. Then Roman and the enforcer entered the ring. Seth was gone. Heyman was cornered. The segment didn't end with a spear or a Superman punch. Roman didn't need theatrics. He circled Heyman, then leaned in, nose to nose. "You chose the wrong side," he whispered. Then the enforcer stepped forward, and placed Heyman's old phone in the center of the ring. The same phone he used to communicate with the bloodline. Roman picked it up, stared at it, then crushed it in one hand. The message was received. That night ended with no violence, but the threat was crystal clear. Backstage, Rollins punched a wall. Bloodied his knuckles. Shouted into a monitor. "We end this at SummerSlam," he said. Roman dies at SummerSlam. And so the war was declared, but Roman Reigns had already chosen the battlefield. And this time, there would be no mercy. The night of SummerSlam didn't begin like a typical WWE pay-per-view. There was an electricity in the air that even the most seasoned performers could feel in their bones. Something unspoken. Uneasy. The kind of tension that didn't need hype packages or backstage interviews to build. The WWE Universe knew what was coming. Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. Not for a title. Not for a trophy. But for power. For vengeance. For legacy. And in the hours leading up to the main event, not a single soul knew how far it would go. By mid-show, reports were already flooding in backstage. Roman Reigns had arrived, but not through the usual entrance. Eyewitnesses claimed he entered the venue with no entourage, no WWE official, no PR handler. Just the enforcer, dressed in black from head to toe, wearing a sleeveless tactical vest with no logo, no name. A man out of place, out of time. One catering staff member reportedly dropped their tray at the sight of him and said simply, "That's not a wrestler. That's a war machine." Roman didn't speak. He didn't look at anyone. He moved through the halls like a shadow in human form, heading toward his locker room that no one else was allowed to enter, not even Triple H. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins was unraveling. The adrenaline masked it on screen, but behind the curtain, the tension was crawling up his spine. His gear was different tonight, more armored, less flamboyant. Gone were the dazzling jackets and peacock feathers. In their place was black and gold leather. Heavy gloves. A steel jaw. He wasn't coming out to entertain tonight. He was coming out to survive. The arena reached a fever pitch as the match approached. The video package played, showcasing Roman's betrayal, Heyman's alliance with Seth, the rise of the new faction, and Roman's shocking return. But even with the grand production, the truth was this: no one knew what was about to happen. The script had been torn to shreds. And when the bell rang, it wasn't wrestling that followed, it was war. Roman Reigns didn't wait for introductions. He stormed the ring before Seth had even removed his coat. The two collided like titans, fists flying, gritted teeth snarling under the spotlights. It was not clean. It was not pretty. It was brutal. Seth tried to ground Roman with speed, but every strike Reigns landed felt like a hammer crashing through steel. The crowd couldn't decide who to cheer. They roared for both, for neither, for the violence itself. Then came the turning point. Paul Heyman slid a chair into the ring. For a second, Roman paused. Looked down at it. Then looked at Heyman. And smiled. He didn't take the chair. He kicked it back under the ropes and pointed at Heyman from across the ring. The message was clear: no shortcuts. But Rollins was a different man. He didn't hesitate. As Roman turned his attention back to the fight, Seth lunged for the chair, swung it hard, and cracked it across Roman's spine. The echo rang through the stadium like a gunshot. Roman dropped to one knee. A second shot came. Then a third. The referee tried to intervene, but Rollins shoved him aside. The crowd booed now. Loud. They didn't like what they were seeing. Seth wasn't fighting anymore. He was punishing. He lifted the chair again, only to freeze mid-swing because the enforcer had stepped into the ring. No music. No lights. No theatrics, just presence. Rollins took a step back, his arms shaking. The enforcer walked slowly toward him. Each footstep heavier than the last. The chair slipped from Seth's hand. His face said it all. He knew what was coming. The crowd held its breath then, just as the enforcer reached him. The lights cut out. Black. A second passed. Then 2. 3. And then, boom, pyro erupted. The lights returned. Roman Reigns was on his feet. The enforcer was gone, but Rollins? Rollins lay in the center of the ring, broken. Not by Roman. Not by a punch. But by fear. Roman stood over him, stared down, breathing heavy. He didn't gloat. He didn't posture. He simply knelt beside Seth, leaned in close, and whispered something that only they heard. Then he stood. Looked directly into the camera. Raised his hand high, and made the bloodline symbol. The arena exploded. Roman had not just returned. He had redefined the war. Seth Rollins was stretchered out of the arena that night. The crowd didn't cheer. They watched in stunned silence as the former champion was wheeled past the very man he had tried to erase. Roman didn't flinch. He just watched, cold, unforgiving, unshaken. The next night on Raw, Paul Heyman opened the show. Alone. Pale. Shaking. He didn't cut a promo. He didn't even ask for a mic. He looked into the camera and said 5 words: "You can't stop the bloodline." Then he walked away. That was the last time Heyman was seen on WWE television for weeks, because what followed wasn't just a fallout, it was a purge. The new bloodline, spearheaded by Roman and the Enforcer, began appearing across both brands. Silent attacks. Backstage assaults. targeted destruction of anyone who had aligned with Seth's faction. Braun Breaker was the first to fall. Bronson Reed vanished without a trace. Even Damian Priest, who had tried to remain neutral, was found unconscious in the parking lot after an untelevised live event. And still, Roman said nothing. No promos. No press, only presence until one night, 2 weeks later, on SmackDown, when Roman Reigns stood in the center of the ring, surrounded by darkness. He looked into the camera and said only this: "I built this island of relevance with my bare hands. Now I drown every traitor in its tides." Then he raised his arm, and behind him, the enforcer removed his hood. Gasps filled the arena. It was Zilla Fatu, not as the wayward son of a fallen bloodline, not as the grieving nephew of a disgraced dynasty, but as Roman's sword. Roman's justice. Roman's final blood. The crowd erupted. Shock turned into awe. The war had come full circle. Roman hadn't just returned. He'd evolved. And Seth Rollins? His empire lay in ruins, because you can take Roman Reigns out of WWE, but you can't take WWE out from under Roman Reigns, not unless you're willing to burn with him. And this time, he brought gasoline. It was no longer a question of who ruled WWE. It was now a question of who dared to challenge him. Roman Reigns had not only returned, he had ignited a new era of chaos, one where fear replaced respect, and silence was a strategy. Following SummerSlam's seismic war, Seth Rollins disappeared from television. Paul Heyman vanished into the shadows. The Rollins faction collapsed like a house of cards in a storm. And in their absence, Raw became something else. It became a hunting ground. The very next Monday night, the show opened in an eerie, unfamiliar way. No pyro. No music. Just dead silence as the camera panned backstage. Lights flickered. Security guards ran down hallways. Shattered monitors, broken steel chairs, equipment boxes overturned. Commentary didn't speak. The silence wasn't a mistake, it was a message. This was no longer Raw. This was a warning, and then, a single phrase echoed across the arena speakers. No music. Just a voice: "I'm not waiting anymore." Roman Reigns live. Unscripted. Unapologetic. He stepped through the curtain slowly. Alone, but the audience knew. They knew he wasn't truly alone. Moments later, Zilla Fatu, his new right hand, his final bloodline, emerged behind him. No smile. No gesture. Just presence. The camera focused on his eyes, deadly, cold, the kind of eyes that didn't seek recognition, only obedience. Roman didn't even need to raise his voice. "You thought SummerSlam was the end?" It was only the beginning. He turned slowly, his eyes surveying the arena, daring someone, anyone, to interrupt. "You thought I'd come back for belts?" Roman continued, his tone cutting like glass. "I've held every title that matters. But you forgot what I told you a long time ago. I'm not here to be champion. I'm here to be God." And with that, the lights flickered again. When they returned, 3 WWE superstars were laid out backstage: Ricochet, Chad Gable, and Tommaso Ciampa. Each one left unconscious beside a black and red envelope. Inside each envelope, a photo of Seth Rollins, torn in half. The message was clear: anyone who had once stood beside Seth, anyone who dared align against Roman, was now a target. The locker room erupted in panic. Multiple wrestlers refused to work their scheduled segments. Some demanded transfers to SmackDown. Others asked to go dark entirely, choosing to stay off camera until Roman's campaign ended. But there was no escape. Roman had made it clear, this wasn't about brands anymore. This was about loyalty. By the following week, Raw wasn't a wrestling show. It was a manhunt. Security doubled. Triple H issued a public statement calling for a return to professional order. But he knew, this was out of his control. Roman wasn't responding to creative. He wasn't answering to management. He had become something WWE hadn't seen in years, a rogue king with his own army. Then came the bombshell. Cody Rhodes, one of the few men to never bow to the bloodline, stood in the ring, mic in hand, a storm brewing in his eyes. "You want to burn it all down, Roman," he said. "Then light the match. Because I'm not afraid of ghosts. And I sure as hell don't run from tyrants." The crowd exploded. But backstage? Panic. Cody had just put a target on his back and Roman hurt him. That same night, Cody's rental car was found in the arena parking lot, windows shattered, windshield caved in. Spray painted across the hood in crimson paint were 4 chilling words, "Run before it's real." WWE cut to commercial. But fans weren't stupid. They knew a war was coming. A real one. Backstage sources leaked word that Roman had quietly expanded his reach. Zilla Fatu wasn't the only soldier. Rumors swirled that Jacob Fatu had returned in secret meetings. That Hikuleo and Tama Tonga were being courted by Roman under the table. That the Usos were splintering again, one brother leaning toward reconciliation with Roman, the other preparing for all-out war. The bloodline, it seemed, was multiplying in the shadows. But amidst the chaos, Seth Rollins returned bruised. Bandaged. Different. Gone was the swagger. Gone was the laughter. He walked onto Raw in silence. No pyro. No entrance music. Just him, with a steel chair in one hand and eyes that had seen hell. The crowd roared, but Seth didn't even blink. He stood in the center of the ring, raised the chair, and spoke 7 words.